Welcome to Mix Universe, bringing music to the universe. My name is Chris Zukowski, and I'm the technical director at Terrible Posture Games. Thanks for joining me today at GameSoundCon. And in my free time, I work on Mix Universe as like a passion project. I have been for the last 3.5, 4 years or so. And a little bit more about myself. Who's this Zuko dude? I go by Zuko for short, just because there's too many Chris's in this world. And to prove the point, there's two of us. I'm this one. And this is us at GDC, and thankfully the universe did not explode when we combined our forces for a moment there. But yeah, I've been working in the game industry for about 11 years now. I started as an environment artist, kind of worked my way through technical stuff to be a technical artist, and then now I'm a technical director at an indie game studio. So I love making art, tools, systems, and really trying to solve problems nobody really has the answers for. Some of these problems would include how do you fill up thousands of buildings across a 12-kilometer landscape? This was something I had to do at Army Game Studio really early in my career, and also kind of early in Unreal before Houdini had any like good plugins or integrations. So I ended up making a suite of blueprint creator tools and spline tools and stuff to fill a massive landscape, which was a huge kind of like springboard for my technical aspect of my career. And then another problem would be how do you make a playable sitcom where animators use Unreal instead of Maya. And this was before Control Rig was cool, and we ended up forcing our animators to not have Maya, which was a fun problem to solve. And these are just things that you just can't really prepare for, but I love doing. And something else is how do you get 300 projectiles to run smoothly on the Quest 2? And if you didn't know, the Quest is basically like attaching a phone to your face and trying to run at 72 FPS. So there's a batched effects Niagara system that I don't think has any cool replacements yet, but it allows to shoot hundreds of bullets on the Quest without exploding past that 150 draw call limit. So the reason why I bring this stuff up is there's an interesting question here for Mix Universe is how do you make a visually compelling musical sandbox game toy thing? You might start with a submix that kind of looks like this. If you've used Unreal, submixes are how you kind of mix audio together. And for Mix Universe, it's turned into something like that. So that's 128 submixes kind of pushed to the max there in Unreal. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but that's how I did real-time spectral analysis. So what is Mix Universe? That's probably why you're here. Well, what is this musical sandbox game? Here is the trailer, so we can all kind of be on the same page. This is all real-time in-game. So yeah, that is Mix Universe, and now it's a musical sandbox game, so it's kind of weird and niche and experimental, but it's what we're going to kind of talk about is a little bit more of like how it even got to this point, and just focus on trying to show all the different audio tools or audio features of the engine that you might not even know existed, or at least give you a little bit more of a springboard to jumping off if you have an idea as well. Going back in 2010, I was in school and I had an idea, well, not really, but I wanted to kind of try to expand upon musical stuff. So if you noticed before, none of the stuff that I said about my career was audio related. Everything that this is doing, like this is all just in my free time, and I really like to mess with audio just as a fun thing to do. And I thought maybe it'd be cool to try out something where I place 1,000 grid squares and have them react to audio. It never got that complex because Maya really started crying a bit when I tried to do it. But this was a bit of a test that I did with a smaller test, smaller. And I thought that was pretty cool when I made it, but I just never really did anything because, you know, school and at the time just never did anything. But it never went away. It stuck with me. So now it's 2018. Not now, but in this story. Unreal 4, I've had a lot more experience with it, making those building creator tools, some of the animation pipeline stuff. And I started thinking about what if I took that thing that I made way back and tried to make it in Unreal. So here is a cube that knows about all of its neighbors. And when the cube animates up and down, it tells its neighbors to do the same thing. And kind of has a little bit of randomization as well. And you'll see it can glow, and there's a couple effects. But this is very like, each one of those is an individual actor. It's not efficient at all, but it's just kind of starting the idea. And really, I didn't know what I was doing as far as like, is this going to be a game or a toy or whatever, or just a visual? But expanding upon this, I was like, what if I take the neighboring aspect and I connect them together using a link that's actually visual? Like, what if I try to visualize these links? And something about this kind of sparked this idea in my head where, what if each one of these nodes made a sound? So you can see here, I just kind of show a little bit of you know, how it's just as simple. One actor is parented to another actor to be linked together. So when you started kind of messing with sound, it's a really interesting point in Unreal's like audio capabilities. They just had released something called Audio Mixer, and it was like the new way to do audio in Unreal. And I was like, well, I need to tap into this. I need to try stuff out. So nothing like meta sounds actually existed at this point, but this was also a really simple setup, just audio components on the spheres. And this looks something like that. It's very simple, nothing too crazy at the moment, but it just kind of kept going. Like the idea of what is this thing? And then I started thinking, okay, what about that piano? If I made it so that you could have 88 keys in a sample library and hook it up to MIDI, what would that actually look like? And this is just showing like the data asset that makes that happen. So we have a bunch of details about what the sound is, and then 3 different velocity types. So all this stuff is using data tables and data assets. And then hooking it up to MIDI looks something like this for the first time. And I want to emphasize, that's an engine. Like that's not going through FL Studio or anything like that. That's all coming out of the engine. And if you are to mess with MIDI as well, something that's really important to note is there's some latency for sure, and Unreal is definitely working to improve that. But PCM and ADPCM are the formats that are going to make life a lot easier if you're going to be messing with MIDI, at least initially. So now that I've got this whole network of nodes, I wanted to look at how do I make them all kind of go off at the same time. Or if I have like a whole chord, how do I make sure everything's synchronized to a certain beat clock? And at the time, time synth component was something that just came out as well with the Audio Mixer. And I hooked it all up in the video actually showing it with time synth component, but you can kind of just erase that whole top part, and instead there's quartz. And that's what should be used now. It's like the better way to do it. And everything that I kind of settled on is to do 4/4 timing at first, just to kind of simplify everything. Maybe in the future I'll do different time signatures, but I think one of the biggest things to keep in mind for any type of quantization is to make sure to calculate everything beforehand before you actually want to play the note, because it needs to be like queued up before it plays. It's the only way to make something that actually synchronizes properly. So here's what that looks like. One of the first tests. So something you might also notice is the visuals are kind of coming along for the ride as well, because as I'm solving other problems, I'm always going back and forth between visuals. So I keep going, I have something, but what? Is it a DAW? And if it is, I don't want to do it. Is it a fancy visualizer system? Something that has no meaning and eventually will fade like the rest of my ambitious projects? Or could people, and it always kind of like this one question, could people have fun making music with this? That's something that always drove my creative process. So moving forward with this, I knew I didn't want to make a DAW, but I also knew all this other stuff. But I figured, what about motion? Is motion something that I should really keep in mind as far as the nodes? Like, can the nodes move? So this is with the nodes moving. Which looks cool, I think, but from a design standpoint, it's pretty chaotic, and it's really hard to tell what is what's connected to what. So it's still something that has stuck with me a little bit, similar to how the whole project started, but so in the future I might revisit the idea of movement, but right now I kind of just pulled back from that, and I was like, okay, things need to be 2D kind of ish and spatialized in some sort of way visually that is easy to display. So I had to start thinking like a designer. And at the time I was working on those animation tools, and I thought maybe I could try to do something, because nothing editable was in game yet. I was like, maybe I could try to do something cool with the editor to get some like manipulators. So I hooked up this piano thing.
The whole thing. It's like by default. Now I'll change a note.
So I'm like clicking physically on these little piano pieces in the editor and getting really excited about it. And I think I mentioned in that video that it's super quick, but it's really not. It wasn't that quick at all. So I'm making more progress. Whenever I hit design issues or anything like that, I always try to pull back so I can keep making progress. I'm like, okay, while I'm thinking about design, let's work on visuals again. Just go back to visuals, do something else, and maybe the design will just kind of like fall into place. So you can see in this video, I have added like more particle effects, started using audio synesthesia, which is a really helpful or handy plugin, which I'll keep bringing up in this talk, but that's basically how you do a lot of audio visualization in Unreal. This was just kind of like the next step in visuals for it. And that's Head Bob. That's how I got through the pandemic. So as you can see here, and I'll just kind of show this. I know this is not good for the live feed, but all of these are individual drums. And the problem with that is it's pretty hard to kind of connect everything together, and it's a bit cumbersome to edit stuff. So back to the design element of things, I was like, okay, maybe that's where I should start, is with the drums. So looking at how to make drums more compact or whatever, I tried to lean on some other systems that exist, like sequencer type things in the audio world. So I thought maybe adding a ring around drums could be interesting, like drum nodes. And this is what came out of that. And suddenly 16 nodes could be handled by just one. And this was like a really big moment for design for me, because I was like, okay, maybe nodes can be more than just one sound. Maybe they can also just do more than one thing. And here is kind of where I started landing when I did more and more of the editor type stuff. And this is all in game, but also worked in the editor. It was made with UMG. So you can edit the different sequence values, the volume, all that stuff, check on and off the rhythm pattern. And then there's also pitch and note values. But the problem with this is it looks more like a DAW. And it's like, I'm basically like, okay, well now I'm making a DAW again, cool. And when it's like, when I get close to the DAW, there's no way I could ever compete with what's out there, and I don't want to. So I'm looking more at full editing, and I know that no matter what I do, if it's a DAW, if it's not a DAW, I'm gonna probably need undo and redo. Like some similar other games like Planet Coaster or whatever, there's gonna be some sort of undo redo system. And if you don't do an undo redo system in the beginning of a game's conception, it makes it a lot harder to do it later. So this is what kind of came from that.
Look, I made undo. Look, I'm trying to screw all this up. Undo. Okay, and then I can also delete stuff, move stuff around, split this, move that around, split this, delete that, delete this, undo.
And you can see that I added a few other nice things like moving nodes around, splitting them, all that stuff. Just because I'm starting to feel it out. I'm feeling out that where this is becoming a thing. So as more design issues happen, what about visuals? Back to audio synesthesia, there is a spectral analyzation in audio synesthesia that uses constant Q, which is a really fancy visualizer type method. And all this stuff is pre-calculated ahead of time, so it's something that isn't going to work with like modulation or anything. But at the time, it was pretty cool looking. And then I just spent hours just looking at it. So back to design, UI UX is tough, you know, biggest understatement of the century. And I still couldn't shake that everything looked like a glorified spreadsheet or a cruddy or DAW. And I had to figure out something. So this was a step forward in trying to add UI onto nodes themselves. You can change the type of drum with this weird like radial selector thing. And then the type of node as well. And then I even had like a piano, radial piano thing with the octaves up and down, which worked, but I think, you know, everything, this was like a step propelling to the future of this thing to where it is now. So the other kind of big thing with design and structure was, what about layering, a way to control complexity? Because I knew with like some of the earlier demos and stuff, I was hitting a limit, you know, a certain, you can only go to like hundreds and hundreds of nodes before your computer starts screaming. So this was a way to kind of add structure to a mix and be able to also kind of add surprise, and that, you know, if the beat's gonna drop, maybe something cool would happen. So mixing all of these elements together got to a demo like this. So lots of visual updates, lots of real-time stuff, and then even like fluid simulation around the nodes, which I eventually had to kind of take out because it was a bit too expensive, but it looked cool. And this is what that looks like. This was probably one of the biggest moments of this thing as far as I'm starting to actually figure out what it is. I know what it is now. It's a music kind of sandbox creation tool at the moment. And the part that I really hate about that sentence is the word tool. But moving forward is what I'm always going to be fighting, is like that DAW, that tool type aspect of things. So the next steps in this, though, were meta sounds. And what's really interesting is at the moment when I was trying to figure out how to do modulation, how to do the next kind of click and drag type interface type stuff, Unreal 4 just couldn't do it. Not in an easy way. I'd have to be a full-on audio programmer if I really wanted to pull off what I wanted to do. So what I want to do is I wanted all effects to be changed in real time and allow for modulation. When Unreal 4 heard me say that, it started to cry. Then I did. Then Metasound showed up. Literally 2 weeks after I was into that phase, Unreal 5.1 showed the preview of Metasounds, and I was like, well, we're going. So this is the first time of getting this click and drag type element interface in. And you can see all the different things on the bottom. You can click and drag on these nodes. And this is what it looks like when you're doing something like a really quick LFO type thing. And that, I think, all these are like really big moments for this project because every little step propels it forward like tenfold. So just to kind of show what's going on here, there's 30 inputs going into one Metasound, which is incredible to me because it's literally just one Metasound asset that is being shared for all of these nodes. And you can see there's some whole plethora of things going on there. Each one of these are like individual inputs. And then the actual Metasound looks something like this, which I don't have time to go over all of the details of this, but you can see all the inputs on the upper left. You can see the blue nodes are actually like Metasound patches, so they have a little bit more complexity to it. And each one of these things, you can kind of think of each one of the blue nodes as like an effects stack on top of like an original wave player or a synth type procedural synth. And speaking of procedural synths, this is an example of one of the quick type setups for that, where I have 5 different generators, kind of offset pitches in order to control width. And here's showing a lot of the newer type, very close, if not what it looks like right now, where all the modulation elements, what they look like click and dragging, and adjusting the widths for these synths. And then sine doesn't do anything, but I still did it anyway for the video. And then we have this distortion in Bit Crusher. And I'm really just showing this more just like a reference later. If you want to look at the slides, I think they're going to be available. Cool. So I don't have time to show off all that, but I will show the actual video. And that's probably the simplest version of distortion. So there's way more complex ways to do it. But this was probably one of the cooler things, though, for sure, is time stretch vocals. So there is a node that already exists called delay pitch shift, which a lot of people don't really know about, which allows you to pitch shift something like a wave sample without changing the duration of the actual wave file. And then I combine this method with the synchronizing it to the BPM in the actual mix. So if I were to have vocals, I don't have to worry about the player like having to re-time their vocals every time they change the tempo. So this is an example of that in action. Sorry, I'm changing the tempo right now. And all the wave samples change or stay the same, synchronized. And then you can also change the pitch. And I like pushing it to the extreme too. It's just so fun. How's everybody doing? We all right? Okay. So some of the finalization of elements for this thing was something that I didn't really touch on that much is the links. So each one of these nodes is connected by a link, but then the links themselves have a lot of timing control, and these little timing elements use the same click and drag interface as the modulation elements. And the timing is, like I said before, 4/4 time signature, and Quartz is set to 1/16 for the synchronized beat clock settings, and each one of those squares represents one of those beats. And then there are modulator rings, which these allow modulation across multiple nodes, so that way you don't have to sit there and like add modulation to 10 different things. They can also activate and stack. Yeah, that's my version of Willy Wonka's tunnel thing. Then there are radar nodes, where these kind of changed up how activation was controlled. So for the first time, other nodes started activating other nodes. And then finally some better editing, but still not exactly where I want it to be, but it's quicker than what it was. So it's better than that initial video that I showed you, where now you have all the different notes, and then you have the octaves, and then key signatures as well. Bang. And then there's this. So back to this wackiness. We have 128 submixes, which I do not recommend anybody doing, but at the time that was like the only way to do it. So thankfully, well, just to kind of give it some context, submixes you can tell to at any time you can say start analyzation or stop analyzation, and this will do spectral analyzation real time on any submix. This is something you can look at. There's some pretty decent documentation on that, I think, for that. But now in 5.1, there is something called the Audio Synesthesia's Real-Time FFT Analyzer. And this, unfortunately, is only code so far, so you do need C++ in order to do it. But in the future, it will be Blueprint supported, hopefully. Okay, well, I can't promise that because I don't work for Epic, but yes. And this was like, this uses audio buses in order to visualize data on audio buses, which are much cheaper, and I can basically make this entire audio pool thing that I've made completely scalable now. So if you have a low spec machine, you can have like 16 active sounds versus 128. Instead of before, where I was forcing everybody to incur that 128 submix cost. And this is what real-time visuals look like for spectral analyzation. And this is something I can make a little bit better looking, but I think it looks pretty good for now. And you can see it. It'll actually work with like delay and all the modulation on top of it. So goodbye submixes. And then kind of some other finalization type stuff was getting it to work with the Steam Workshop. So this is something that I think is really crucial for this project. Other people can, people can play this thing, then upload it to the workshop. Other people can download that thing, make changes to it, upload it to the workshop as well. And it keeps track of who, like the actual collaborators during that moment. So whoever the original person is, they can't get too mad if somebody was just like tries to remake the thing that they made. But this was using the Steam Workshop Accessor plugin. And here's a few examples of what people have already made with Mix Universe. And I'm excited to see what's next. So the future. Can I make it fun to play, not just create? So this whole thing, we're kind of like, not exactly like Little Big Planet, but very similar to having like a create mode and a play mode. So some sort of reason to actually go in and make a mix, or even have this integrated into the nodes. I've toyed with things, don't have much to share at the moment, but have some cool ideas, I think. Then controller support, preset node setups where you can actually take entire drum sections and template them and place them much quicker. And then themes, which is something like you can go through portals and warp through grasslands and then come back to like mountainscape. So those are the three like big ones. And then tutorialization, which I didn't put on here because I always forget about it. So right now, it's already been in something I call the early playtest. So it's not early access, but it's in a format on Steam where you can go in and you can go to the Steam page and actually request access, and you get to play it right away. The main thing that I ask is, if you do play it, please tell me if it sucks and why. And all the feedback is welcome, and all the information is available at mixuniverse.net. So you can go on there, figure out where all the links are and everything. And what I'm aiming for is sometime in the first quarter of 2023 to release this thing in early access. So having the actual create mode be in a state where I can trust, or where people can trust me to not break things when they make their mixes. So I want to see what people can do with this thing, and I'm excited to bring it here at GameSongCon. So something that is really important about being here is that Epic and the community is awesome, and I would not be here right now if Epic didn't reach out and specifically say, hey, we saw Mix Universe, would you like to talk about that a little bit more with us? And I'm super grateful to be here to show it off, because the more and more Epic interacts with the community, the more cool things can happen. And just the audio team at Epic in general is fantastic, honestly, and they continue to show that they care about the people using their tools. So yeah, that is Mix Universe. So thank you.